and we're going to go ahead and get into it. Unless, does anybody have anything pressing? I was going to go ahead and start with the journey. It's I think perfect for setting the tone for this evening. But give me a comment if there was something that you're not going to be able to stay past 30 minutes at least. We were gonna do the journey, then head into the lessons, and put any of our community or Q&A or anything like that, put it at the end. That's cool with y'all. Just give me a holler right there if anybody needs something else, because we are flexible to the needs of everyone. My little girl's over there. She's having her dinner. I have about an hour tonight. Okay. Kate, do you need anything? Or, I mean, do you need any support? Lori's cool with it. If I start now, Kate, then you can get most of the content. But if you needed something to chat about, then a journey sounds great for Jamie too. Okay. All right. Good. Okay, then. Well, then let's go ahead and get into it. This is our compassionate heart journey. Will really set us up for what we are opening up tonight. About 22 minutes. I'm going to go sit on the couch and partake with you all. If I can find where I put it. Oh, there. That's it. Okay. Oh, I don't know why it's that weird color. All right, so I'll start. Go ahead and get yourself settled in, and I will hit play in about 5 seconds. If you don't hear anything in like 10-15 seconds, please let me know. I'm going to remove myself now. Welcome to your sacred practice. In the meditative journey ahead, we will visit a special valley, a wonderful place of your own, where great blessing and shift shall occur. And let us begin to move into this sacred time now. And take those 3 big, deep breaths. 3 big, deep breaths, filling the body with this fresh life force. And just relish the sensation of the infilling, the inspiration of respiration. And as these wonderful big deep breaths complete at your own pace, just allow the breathing to return to a natural pace with more awareness, with more enhanced attention on this gift of breathing. And this conscious breathing does bring relaxation, a calm to the physical body. And this sends the signal to the physical body and to the mind that it is your time to go within. And so we welcome and deepen this calm relaxation to the body and the mind. This is just an allowance. And let's follow that awareness, that allowance, by bringing the attention now to the top of the head. And at the top of the head here, we just welcome a serenity, a calming, a relaxation, simply by pondering this calming. And your awareness, like a laser, a light that can bring this relaxation, this calming to the physical body here at the top of the head. And now let's allow it to move down and through the body, over the top of the head, through the middle of the head, the back, all through, relaxing the brain, relaxing the facial muscles. A calm now to those jaw muscles. And you may even feel like you want to make an adjustment with your physical body, and that's just perfect, whatever works, to bring that calm relaxation now down all around the neck, over the shoulders, smoothing and soothing, bringing that calm serenity now over the top of the chest and the back, following this down over the arms, elbows, forearms, wrists, hands, and fingers, relaxing and releasing, for this is the time that you have planned to simply release any tension and let go. Let go to a journey to the inner planes. And with this comfort now, finding that top of the chest now, and all around the mid-back, midsection, welcoming the calm relaxation around the abdominal region, now around the pelvis and the low back, soothing and smoothing and letting go, just releasing, relaxing. And now down through the legs, over the thighs, all around and deep even into the bones. And even just wondering what it means to release that tension even in the bones. Down over the knees, calves and shins, ankles, feet and toes, and now here, a wonderful release to the earth, releasing from the feet. This release brings a calm, brings a relaxation to the body. And how peaceful it feels to be more relaxed, more calm in the body, and just marvel at how simply allowing and welcoming the body and the mind can move into a relaxed and calm state. Keeping the awareness here with your connection to the earth, the physical gravity and connection between your feet or your seat and the earth. And now visualize or sense that this connection between you and the earth, between you and the gravitational pull, imagine that this energy is a glowing earth energy, a connection, a glowing energy between you and the earth. And whatever your posture is now, visualize and imagine that this glowing energy enters your feet, entering your feet. And you draw up this glowing support and nourishment, this energy from the earth. As you draw it up, follow it. Watch it, this glowing energy, as it fills you up through your legs. It fills up your body and your aura, up through the midsection, shoulders, neck, until you are complete with this glowing energy, and it sprouts and bursts out the top of your head, out the top of your aura. And so at this point, you would be very relaxed and calm as you deeply welcome the experience. and also somehow enlivened and refreshed, being imbued with this supportive, glowing earth energy. And even if there is a kind of anticipation in this calm, as you are aware that you have come here to move into a special journey. And to take a journey, we often take a vehicle. And so now visualize or imagine that there is a lovely little magical cloud all around you. And it's supporting you from your seat, it's supporting you from beneath. And this cloud is so comfortable, safe and pleasant. And now, imagine that it begins to lift slowly, ever so slowly. And in this comfort, you begin to float very easily, traveling by your comfortable cloud vehicle. And lifting and floating and moving through the sky. A pleasant journey, just the right pace, magically moving you through time and space like a dream. And so the cloud is approaching the just right landing space. The cloud is approaching the valley of compassion. And gently now, the cloud descends with you upon it. And peacefully, you are placed on the green grass of the valley. And the cloud gently releases you, and you are comfortably on the grass in the valley of compassion. And you're invited to just sit and marvel at the beauty of this place. As if you are listening to the song of birds and breeze. And I wonder what the aroma is. Grass, flowers, here in this valley of compassion. And as far as you could see or sense, there is green grass, so alive, so green. And the sun shines down upon the grass. And it seems that there is a glow, that this grass is glowing and taking in this energy of the green. As you lean into the feeling of this glowing green, and as you are just taking in that green glow, It may be that this place begins to seem familiar. This energy, the energy that it is vibrating. It is compassion. Sweet compassion. To care and understand beyond mind's logic. All around, it is a safe, balanced, and healing compassion. A powerful compassion that always first heals you as you soak it in and receive it. A feeling of being known and accepted. A sense of being deeply valued. This valley of compassion beams with pride about you. You are invited to receive this compassion. Embody it, feel it for yourself, toward yourself. And so take the next few moments to deeply receive all that the Valley of Compassion offers you. simply has fused its frequency of compassion with your heart and being. A bond has formed. A change has occurred. And you are permanently blessed by this experience. And the time has come now to seal this experience, to travel to your time space with this new blessed experience, deeply rooted, deeply embodied into you. And so you can summon your pleasant cloud vehicle with a big deep breath. And so take now that big deep breath. Imagine and sense your cloud cradling you. And as it does, this time the dream travel moves you instantly. And with another deep breath, you're home in your time space. And one more big deep breath as you remember the blessing of the Valley of Compassion and you segue into your body, into your space to enjoy and share compassion. All right. Hi. Oh, I'm little, and now I'm big. Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're heading into lessons now. As I come back, because I went in and I went deep. Whew. Melchizedek came to me in that one. All right. Let's get into it. Okay, that's better. Welcome to class. We are at a part of our journey where we're going to start to talk about some other facets of service that I'm certain you all are already experiencing. Like many of the lessons have been, this will apply to many different modalities, is we're going to be talking about counseling and, in a sense, coaching. Counseling in an intuitive reading is often a part of it all throughout while you're actually giving intuitive reading or healing, as your client is giving you feedback, asking questions. And typically at the beginning of any session, there is this time for the client to, as we might say in an intuitive reading, state their intention. And in fact, this is the time that they may be venting and needing your support as they are presenting what it is that has brought them to the session. Now, of course, there is this style of intuitive reading that, we're not really covering so much in this journey, not because it doesn't have value, but it doesn't really need that much coverage. And that kind of service that wouldn't really include counseling or some sort of coaching or teaching is when an intuitive, a psychic says, hello, I'm going to just start reading you and don't say anything. And maybe doesn't even get very much feedback except for, every now and again, does this resonate? Is that who, if it's mediumship, does this sound like your loved one? And so on and so forth. Now, again, that's perfectly valid, but even in such sessions as that, we might get a little further along into it. And let's say if it's mediumship and then the parent is saying this, that, and the other thing, and then the client is going to say, their feedback about, they're going to want to process a little bit. And they may say, oh, well, I had this experience with my dad and so on and so forth. Now, there, of course, a psychic could just listen and say, mm-hmm, and keep going and refrain from any kind of, support that is counseling, coaching, or teaching. Now, that is a style that is perfectly valid. Maybe it's even more valid if we're doing something super short, intuitive reading. Let's just give some intuitive information and get in and out. So we'll just acknowledge that. Doesn't really require much of our investigation or practice, probably. It's something that's within the skill set of what we'll be talking about now. Many of us are already working in the style that we're talking about, where the client would be presenting what they're working through, even as the intention and then as it progresses throughout. In this program, we're also going to be talking about a style of coaching, intuitive coaching. And once again, I think this is just woven into all that we do. As we are open with our intuitive abilities, and however we are actually bringing that to a modality, there's a sense of intuitive coaching, teaching, and counseling. I'm going to, in this opening part, just give a few pointers, just the kind of like a spark of a list of a different, of some things to contemplate when it comes to coaching, counseling, teaching, and teaching within a session. And this is something that we'll be opening up a lot and have several lessons of varying size. And so, setting the stage for today, we are present for our clients to move them into compassion. And this is compassion for themselves, compassion for others. And in this, we are modeling and creating a space of compassion for them. And let's be clear what compassion is. Compassion is recognizing the suffering of another and taking action to alleviate that suffering. Now, good news for us is that we know that energy works. So let's say as we're walking around in our lives outside of sessions, and we understand that a prayer or a sending of unconditionally positive energy to someone that we may not even have contact with because perhaps they're across the world in a war zone, or it's something that we see on the news or in media about someone who is in suffering, and all there is their story, is their narrative. Well, we know that the action that we can take to alleviate their suffering can include the energetics. And in that, we are able to truly offer compassion. If we didn't acknowledge that, if we didn't know that, if we didn't have that wisdom and that truth about how energy works, love works every time, and it is not confined to time or space. Well, then, and of course, I know I've had this in other times in my life, and maybe I ever forget it. Without that awareness, we can really get bogged down with the pain that we cannot facilitate on the plane of the third dimensional action. So let us remember that compassion and the taking action to alleviate suffering includes your action of energy, your prayer, and just the presence of your heart. Hallelujah. God bless you. God bless us that we are here with that awareness. Now bringing compassion and the space of compassion to session work. It actually gives us a different focal point, a different further out goal. Because compassion in session work goes even deeper than the moment when a person is feeling stressed out, worried, depressed, or sad, or in grief. In session work, we want to help to move them into their own facility of alleviating suffering. Now, we do get to also, as intuitives, rely on that information, that crystallized, fractalized energy that comes through, and we get to deliver it as words, and it can land in their energy in ways that are possibly impossible for us to even track. And that's wonderful, that faith that we get to hold because we understand energy. Now, the reason I say the goal is even further out is because in a counseling or intuitive coaching portion of your session or full session of this, we aren't always rescuing them in the most superficial ways of their discomfort. And what I mean by that is we're not trying to fix them. We're not trying to fix them. We are helping them to process it sometimes. We are helping to empower them in other times. And one of the first stages of that is active listening. Just having a safe space for a person to express and release what is burdening them, the suffering that they have brought to this threshold of this container that you are creating and holding for them. Listening and listening alone has tremendous benefits. As a client may be releasing something that it feels scary and dark, and as you are able to listen and breathe and regulate your nervous system, that is an amazing piece of healing in and of itself. We don't have to stop there. I'm not suggesting that we do, but it is a very significant opening layer. So we have the active listening, which is listening in the moment and staying very present with exactly what they're saying. Every now and again, we might need to say more about that. I have a question about this. That's a part of the active listening. And as opposed to, I guess, expecting to move beyond that, you know more than what they're saying. I think we all get this concept of active listening, and we might drill down into it in a subsequent lesson. Because I want to move into now spiritual listening. Now, it is my belief, I guess I should say, that clinical therapists who do good healing work also do spiritual listening, whether they call it that or not. And many do call it that, as in my acquaintance with many therapists. Spiritual listening is, for example, when they're venting, when they're sharing their intention or their feedback, anything at all. And it doesn't even have to only be something that seems to be of the sad or lower vibration kind of sharing and venting. It can be the processing forward, moving into the forward empowerment of it. What we're doing is we want to listen with our intuitive presence. It does tend to be more anchored in the physical body, down below the neck, and it's still not only in the body. It's just correlated to the body below the neck. It is the subconscious listening. It is the intuitive listening. It's also a sort of creative listening. All of these words kind of comprise our spiritual senses, wouldn't you agree? Creative, intuitive, and that's subconscious listening. As they are moving through it, and you have the sense of it coming in through your senses, your body and your senses, and all of your subtle senses. You might be paying attention to, you might notice certain words or phrases or even subjects that kind of stand out. For me, they just show up. And it's sometimes it's a sense of claircognizance, because they just seem to light up, and I don't have any reason why they're lighting up. They're just, ooh, there's a heft, there's a pulse, there's a sense of gravity to it. Maybe even sometimes it seems to show up in my mind's eye with a little light around it. And sometimes it's in that claircognizant sense. I'm saying something about it before I've even noticed that I wanted to say something about it. So it's the sense of someone saying, and sometimes it is actually just, a pragmatic, when someone is rejecting themselves, saying something negative about themselves, putting themselves out of their empowerment. Either one of these are highly valuable, equally valuable, however you notice it. And in that spiritual listening, these words or phrases or subjects that stand out, you might just take a moment to ask them to expand on them and give more examples, perhaps, or just say more. This is something I say a lot. Can you say more about, and repeat their words to them? It could be a good time for them just to continue to vent it out, and just letting them unpack it. And then, for example, if you say more about this, then perhaps there comes a moment where you go, hold on one moment, I want to check in with Spirit. Or perhaps it's now the message about, even if you don't say, hold on a moment, maybe coming through. And that sense of being able to help them process and become more empowered will just show up. So I'm just moving through, again, a few simple, although not simple, I'm moving through a simple explanation of complex subjects, just to get us into this counseling piece. Now, asking questions is a powerful way to help them to process, to empower them, without the urge to fix them or rescue them. Now, of course, we do want to rescue them, and however, we don't want to, in our rescuing them, rob them of their power. And that can lead us to what is actually called countertransference. And countertransference is when we have a sense of wanting to save them, and it's like, and it's okay. It happens. We just have to find how it can be functional. An example of something like that would be someone is saying that their partner is speaking aggressively to them. Now, first of all, at any time that someone seems physically threatened, we go right there first and say, are you in any physical danger? Noted. But if someone sounds like they're being verbally abused, well, what countertransference, wanting to rescue them from that, it'd be the kind of thing that we would do with our friends. We're like, well, F that, not that you would curse even, but you know what I mean? That sense of like, I can't believe they said that to you. You should already trying to fix things, aren't we? And you feel that sense of defensive, like they are someone you want to hold back, and you want to create an enemy out of this other person. They may be an enemy, but you don't have to be in the sense of even awareness that there is an enemy. All that we need to do in certain situations like this is maybe reflect what is going on. For example, it might be that instead of going, I can't believe, well, you could say, this sounds terrible. I'm so sorry this was said to you, that you had to receive this kind of painful speech and communication. And it sometimes might be that you say, I just want to be clear with you. What you are describing is verbal abuse, or it's some other kind of, name it. These subtle shifts are highly professional, powerful, and is keeping them in their power instead of you needing to rescue them. Another little point, again, I'm just moving through a few points just to spark our appetite and our interest and our curiosity of counseling, coaching, and teaching in a session. One thing that we want to be sure in our empowerment efforts, practice, empowering them, is we never, and actually in your life or to anyone, never say, make you feel, make me feel. I know it's so funny because it's in television and film, and every time they say it in a movie, I'm like, they did not have a real therapist counseling on this film. And sometimes you'll hear that this wasn't said, and you're like, oh, they had a real therapist counseling on this film. If someone says, my partner said, I hate you. You're a so-and-so, you know, we would never want to say, how did that make you feel? Why? Because make you feel is disempowering. We always want to help our clients to recognize that they are sovereign in their state, in their felt sense. So even if they have a dream, they're sharing a dream. How did that dream make you feel? We want to stay away from that. And again, just as a side note for your life in communication with someone, if something was said that didn't help, you felt it didn't help, and your feelings were hurt, you could say, when you said that, I experienced these feelings. I know it's a little wordy and it sounds a little therapizing, but it really does help to bring a closeness. It helps to open the space rather than close it down. So if a person were sharing a dream, if a person were sharing a difficult situation that happened to them, rather we would say, for example, and how do you feel when you think about that? And how do you feel when you reflect on that conversation? What is it like in your body as you replay that scenario? We want to bring them back to the fact that they're having an experience. It is valid, and they can step into it. Nothing is making them feel anyway. So yeah, we might break this down into a big lesson on many different things you could say instead of make you feel or make me feel. Just a little note to spark us. So once again, we are always here to empower, not to fix. And that brings me to the point of another thing that we get to have as a part of our tools is that we're aware of this conditioning kind of thing that happens to us. And in the forthcoming lessons, we're going to look at a couple of ways that people present. I mean, many different ways that people present, that we can learn about it through the lens of human design. And by the way, there's many, many, many more that we'll be looking at different aspects of human design, how we differentiate from one another, so that we can understand how we can witness how someone is how they would mechanically, naturally be functioning for themselves. And therefore we aren't trying to fix them, basically condition them, because we don't understand, I don't understand why they feel that way. Now, here's the thing, is that with presence, you don't need to know about mechanics of human design or anything in order to hold the correct presence. Spirit, love knows how to do it. So let's be clear that however much we learn about mechanics and how different people are, we will never know all of that. But learning a bit more about it helps us to put more in our awareness and expand even more. So I'll give you an example of conditioning another, because I'm going to talk about it from my life. Y'all know I'm a reflector. And so the reflector aura is 1% of the population. So, I have experiences that everyone has, every experience I have, there are things that people have these experiences, but I also have experiences that some people don't have. If that probably makes a little sense. And so I have one friend who is not a counselor or spiritual practitioner at all. It's a dear, dear friend. And this person, every now and again when I'm sharing something, I can feel in his energy where he's like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why she feels that way or sees it that way. He loves me, cares about me, and he is able to sense that I'm having some suffering, of some kind. And in his discomfort of me being in suffering, which again, it's a good intention. He doesn't want me to be in suffering. he tries to fix it. And he's like, well, you should just do this. And why don't you do this and that, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And so he's actually in a subtle way rejecting me, but it's because he cares about me. I feel and see all of the mechanics there, so it doesn't hurt my feelings. It does. I'm not conditioned by it because I know myself well and I know my friend, and I just go, yeah, yeah. And I actually think I consider like, well, maybe there is something for me to consider in that. I don't have to put it in my energy right now. But you see, for example, in therapy, this was from HMI College of Hypnotherapy. This was founded by a clinical psychologist, and he had noticed back in the 60s that there was a tendency for therapists to, the therapy profession to attract people who were more emotionally expressive, and the partner in the person in the partnership who was like, let's talk about our feelings, let's do this. And in the Kappa-Cinean model, that's called the physical, the person who moves forward emotionally and even physically. And then there is another type in a partnership, the polarized part, whose emotions are not as present to them. They don't move forward emotionally. They do sometimes, but it's a different style. It's not wrong. And Dr. Kappas noticed that the therapy profession tended to attract the people who are like, let's talk about the emotions. And therefore, in counseling, couples counseling, that there was like this aspect of the one who was, what is called the emotional in the Kappa-Cinean theory, the one who needed a little more time to process their emotions on their own before they could bring them forward. That's really just simply it. That there was like, you need to change, you need to change, you need to change. And so we're conditioning, even though Dr. Kappas doesn't talk about the way, conditioning that person to be different than what is natural for them instead of giving them space to bring forward what is natural for them. So what we're going to look at is, first, coming up, we're going to look at different ways of having compassion. Or it's actually different styles of empathy by the psychological model. I'll let that unfold. But imagine in your sessions how you might be pivoting between the different styles of having empathy. And also naturally you might have much more one style of empathy than another. And if you can also imagine that your clients, as they're sitting there, they may have different styles of how they have empathy that moves them to compassion. And that will, by you recognizing that, you can facilitate them in moving to their own self-compassion. And you can facilitate in just understanding what their experience is and helping them to find that it's okay to be exactly who they are and to help and empower them. That's the first piece. And then the second piece is an expansion of the different types of empath, which we already had in level 1. And this one is a little bit of a deeper dive. Now, once again, this is just one piece. There are other things that we can look at in the human design chart that would be good for us to, be aware of, so that we know that just because one person is more, I'll just use a very generalized term, introverted, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, it's a wonderful, beautiful part of life. And because a person is very extroverted, nothing wrong with that. Beautiful, wonderful part of life. And, that can be seen in things like our profiles, and like a 5-1 profile like I am might have a tendency to disrupt things, and maybe feels like, if a 5-1 says like, that's bullshit, it's not anger. It's just seeing an opportunity for innovation, little things like that. But we're not dealing with that in these set of lessons. We're just going to start to look at differentiation, just expanding on the different types of empath, or the openness that has more of the tendency to have us literally, directly, and very immediately take on energies. So, and it's not exhaustive, it's not complete, but it's a good overview. All right, we're going to go ahead and get into the rest of these lessons. Just take me a second to cue it up. Oh, I will mention also that these 2 lessons that are forthcoming, well, I'm going to do one lesson, I'll probably chat, and then another lesson, and then, I'll be interspersing with lessons with this version of myself. These were actually from the Empowered Empath. So Kate and Jamie, you were in the Empowered Empath. So this might be a review for you. And also, there are a couple of PDFs that go along with them. Yeah, you will have some supplementals there. And here we go. We are going to talk about different types of empathy, first of all, and then we'll talk about different types of an empath. Now, empathy. Empath, this is a word that is not scientific. It's not even scientific in the sense that I don't know really of any psychological model that uses it. In psychology, they're talking about empathy. But I like what I see that psychology is talking about. So this is kind of the sense where we chunk things up and then we chunk them down. And that means we go big and then we go a little more fractal on them. And to chunk up, I'm starting with the ideas that are in actual psychology about empathy. Because, of course, if we're talking about science, it's compared to how we get up to things and our mystical, spiritual, metaphysical seeking, because that's philosophical. It doesn't have to follow something like a scientific model of being repeatable. Then we get to explore without it in all of the minutia and metaphor and everything. So the first piece here that I will share with you is how psychology views empathy, and I think we'll really relate to that. The second piece after this lesson here, we're going to look at different types of empaths that I see. It's honestly my interpretation, but it's my experience, I will say, and I'll be using as a basis the human design model, which, by the way, you don't have to know anything about human design in order to glean from this, but I will be referring to, human design because I find it just to be so utilizable. And oh my goodness, again, so grounding for, I think, anybody. It really is very much like a user manual. Like if you had a user manual for your computer and it told you about the software and the hardware and the applications, it doesn't tell you what to do with them. It tells you what it might look like if it's functioning or malfunctioning, but the rest of it is up to us and our self-inquiry, and I just think that's really awesome. So anyway, those are the 2 pieces I'm going to compare and contrast. And so let's go ahead and I'll start with how psychology views empathy. Actually, wait, before I do, empathy versus empath. Like I said, empath is a word that we tend to use in our mystical, metaphysical, spiritual seeking and that philosophical exploration, the art form of it. Empathy is more universalized and everyone can have empathy, and this will help us to see just how we may have a tendency of one of the 2 major ways that psychology views them, and then a third way, which is good for all of us. So let's talk about the empathy types in the psychological model. So according to psychology, empathy can be separated into 2 major facets, even though we're going to look at a third one. And this first one we'll look at is cognitive empathy, which refers to the ability to recognize and understand another's mental state, while the affective or emotional empathy is about the ability to share, even merge with, the feelings of others without any direct emotional stimulation to oneself. So just to clarify, affective it means to be, I'm going to make myself a little smaller. Affect is synonymous with emotional or actually ways that we emote. So affect regulation honestly is something that empaths need a little extra care on. However, on the other side of it, someone who is not an emotional empath, like probably all of us are, or most of us are, they actually sometimes on the other side of the spectrum may need to stimulate their affect emoting, their emoting capacity. So when you see the word affect, we're talking about how one emotes and how one expresses emotions and obviously feels emotions as well. So the two types we're looking at here, cognitive empathy, the ability to recognize and understand someone's mental state. And essentially, this is what I've always thought of as sympathy, or to be able to be empathetic, as opposed to how we think about it in metaphysical thought, to be an empath, as that's a type that you are, and you got to figure out how to deal with it. Well, I love that psychology actually has what we've been experiencing inside the model as well. Now, this third type that we're going to look at, we've already touched upon it in my previous offerings, compassion. And compassionate empathy is something that anyone, and I think everyone, would have a goal to cultivate, because it is a balance of both cognitive and emotional empathy. And I will say also that I have well, I'd say personal experience of, as well as in my programs that I'm in for psychology, have asked other instructors who are not working in the spiritual model of being an empath, can one cultivate either cognitive or emotional empathy? And the answer is yes. And so this is something that can help us to be understand how to balance our function as an empath. It doesn't go away, but we can balance it. So let's look a little bit more at, let me put myself on the side so we can see the whole slide. The cognitive empathy. And so I'm taking a quote here from Daniel Goleman, which he has a book called Emotional Intelligence. He's a psychologist, and that, would be really, you'd probably love to look into his work. Cognitive empathy, he says, simply knowing how another person feels and what they might be thinking, and it's sometimes called perspective taking. This is perspective taking, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. It concerns thought, understanding, and intellect. And the benefits of this type of empathy is that it could be very helpful in negotiations. It can be helpful in motivating people and to understand diverse viewpoints. And it is ideal for like virtual meetings as well, to help to be able to bring everyone together. The pitfalls of this is that a person could be disconnected from or ignore deep emotions, and are not able to put themselves in someone else's shoes in a felt sense. So they may be able to intellectually empathize, but they may not be able to feel it. So what's interesting here, it's not a diminished kind of empathy at all, and it is working toward compassion. So oftentimes this person who is leaning to cognitive empathy, they may be sourcing their own past experiences. They see and intellectually identify what is occurring for someone else, and then go, I remember when I have felt this way, similar or almost similar to it. And then that will help them to be in that place to care for the other person, or to validate or recognize the other person. The reason this would be very beneficial in negotiations, I actually have a good example of this. And this is a friend of mine whose parents' cat um, was sick. And it was her mom and dad. And so her dad was home alone with the cat and had to give the cat his medicine. And the kitty did not want the medicine at all. Fighting him, was like, so upset. And he was him being able to identify that, he had a felt sense about it, and he couldn't force the cat to get his medicine, even though he knew that the cat really needed his medicine. That's what he needed. Now, the mother, on the other hand, has more of a cognitive empathy and was able to go, okay, I know he doesn't like it, but this is what he needs. And so she didn't have the felt sense as if she were hurting herself, and she could do what was best for the kitty. And when I was talking to my friend about that, I was like, wow, people like your mom are probably the kind of people who are those angels who could work with children who are at risk, or the elderly, because you got to have this inner strength and resilience. And my friend said, That's exactly what my mom did. She actually worked with at-risk children. And I just thought it's so beautiful. So you see how it can be so valuable to be utilizing this kind of empathy. And you can see if you also have the felt sense, you might be already imagining, oh, this is how I could balance my felt sense about it. So there we go. That is but the thing about so cognitive empathy, it does surround it's around the understanding, the perspectives, and the thoughts of others, and it enables us to comprehend the rationale behind someone's actions and their emotions. So even if they're rationalizing it, they can validate someone else's emotions. Now, if one had this only, if they had way too much cognitive empathy, they didn't have it balanced by the emotional empathy, it could point to someone being narcissistic or sociopathic because they would be able to intellectually understand the motives behind someone's emotions, not feel them, and then they could manipulate. So if you've ever you might be like me. I'm fascinated with sociopaths. Not like I don't get into relationships with them, but I love movies and documentaries about them because I'm like, what is going on there? And so that's what we're talking about here. Or if someone is narcissistic, which we talked about the last time that we met, where they're able to observe what makes someone tick, and oftentimes someone who's an empath, and because it doesn't really strike them, they can exploit it. So thinking about those narcissistic tendencies to love bomb an empath or love bomb someone who they would bring into a toxic relationship to abuse them because they can think, oh, I know they're motivated by feeling this thing. And so I can do that thing that satisfies that logical train of thought that I can see is something that they respond to. So, yeah, that's your cognitive empathy. But once again, I think there's beautiful light, and then of course there's potential shadow. So next we have in psychology, emotional empathy. This is what we think of as the classic empath, honestly. And so Daniel Goleman says, when you feel physically along with the other person as though their emotions were contagious. I'll bet everybody's going, yeah, they are contagious. What do you mean as if? They just are contagious. They happen right here in the feels. um, so what this is concerned with is feelings, physical sensation, and the mirror neurons in the brain. So I was just teaching the other day at HMI College of Hypnotherapy, and I don't remember exactly what I was talking about. I must have been talking about empathy to some degree. And some person asked me if it had to do with mirror neurons. And I said, well, I have researched mirror neurons before. And as I understand that they can they can actually, with biofeedback mechanisms, they can measure when the mirror neurons are stimulated and they can see that the frequency is higher. I think it's called the mu frequency, but I don't think they can count mirror neurons. I don't know if they can count them at all, but they can't count them unless they cut us open. So I don't even know that for sure, but that's what so I don't know because someone said, "Is it maybe because they have more mirror neurons?" And to my research, I don't think we know yet because they would have to have studied the person in their life and then wait until they were no longer in existence. And it's a little harder to do it even though all mammals have mirror neurons. I think it's a little harder to assess because it'd be unless you employed an animal communicator, it'd be harder to assess what is going on emotionally, the inner experience of a mammal that is nonverbal, especially not in a scientific context. They wouldn't be able to say, well, we had this, animal communicator telepathically communicate with the chimp, and the chimp said this. Let's put that in the scientific study. So we're not quite there yet to know if it's because physically those of us who are empaths have more mirror neurons, but it is definitely emotional empathy as we can assess by just interviewing and studying human behavior that it is associated with mirror neurons. So the benefits of being an emotional empath that it can help in close interpersonal relationships and careers like coaching, I would say therapy, but therapy, we need both, which we'll see in a moment. Marketing, yes, because you can really make a connection with someone. And so then they would be more likely to purchase. Management, because you're very emotionally empathic, and HR, of course. Human resources people are angels, so well, they can be angels. Obviously, anyone can do one job one way or another. So the pitfalls is that it could be overwhelming, ding, 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 right? Or we could have inappropriate emotionality or emoting in certain circumstances. So I'll put a pin in that. We'll put it in the context of both of these types here in a moment, and of course that third type. So emotional empathy involves the deep resonating with emotional states of those around us. This form of empathy allows us to connect on a profound level, experiencing what others are feeling. And now, as an empath, I'm teaching us to really recognize we feel it as though it is our own, as though it is native. And we have to usually find out where the seams are between others. And even though we know that there is a seam, this isn't mine, we still experience it. And then our job, or what our growth potential is to, even though we experience it, to not continue to experience it and identify to it so that it becomes harmful to us, or we become inappropriate in a situation, which again I'll experience in a moment. I'll explain in a moment. So an excessive focus on emotional empathy, here's a big downfall, without the counterbalance of cognitive empathy, could lead to distress, not only for ourselves, but it can distress those around us. For instance, a lot people with borderline personality disorder often exhibit high levels of emotional empathy, and this can cause them to become easily overwhelmed with the emotions of others. So we have narcissism or sociopathy on one side, we have BPD on the other side in the extreme cases. But, those are the potentials. So then let's look at compassionate empathy. Once again, this is how psychology views it, which I find very validating. This is taking the middle ground and using your emotional intelligence to effectively respond to the situation with loving detachment, just like my friend's mom was able to do. And, we can imagine having loving detachment, but also the felt sense, the genuine felt sense of what someone else is going through. And they feel seen in the light of you with them. So, with this kind of empathy, we not only understand a person's predicament and feel with them, but we are spontaneously moved to help if needed. And this is when I talked about last time, compassion the is witnessing the suffering of another, being able to see the suffering of another, and then the capacity to take action to alleviate it. So, as an empath, we need to sort out to have enough capacity to do that. Because if we are overwhelmed, we don't have the capacity. And likewise, I bring into it, because we are in the spiritual context here, I bring into that one of the very valuable and utilizable and realistic ways that we can alleviate the suffering of, or we can take action, is to pray or to send energy, however you look at that. Because we are spiritual seekers, because we recognize that energy is one. And if we also then rely on trust in the fact that there is a synchrony to everything. And if I have without, you know, if I'm in my aligned action and someone comes to my awareness who is suffering, perhaps I can give them a hug. Perhaps I can lend an ear. Perhaps I can give them a few dollars or a meal, or perhaps I pray for them. And so when I say if I'm in my aligned action, this would be an extreme version of that, is to be watching that terrible news every single night before I go to bed and torturing myself with this. Honestly, the news is not the news. The news is not journalism. The news is a commercial driven, fear based machine to get us to buy things. It's no longer journalism. So that would be misaligned if I were doing that all the time. You know what I mean? Or putting myself in toxic relationships that are and not being able to separate myself, not taking action to separate myself. So you see what I mean by aligned with myself. If someone comes into my life, if I drive down the street, or my coworker has this going on, or whatever's going on in life, then I have these options. And if we include prayer or sending compassionate energy as a part of that, then and trusting, because we are spiritual speakers, so we're trusting spirit, and then continuing to be that support, and then letting it align if there are more realistic actions to take. But that could also be voting, you know what I mean? Because we have compassion for what's happening in our society. So these are things that will really make our lives much better as well as others. So, what compassionate empathy concerns is intellect, emotion, and action. That's the third piece, is being able to take action. And it considers the whole person, and there's not any pitfalls. And I'm going to say, especially since we have the tools of spirit, because I can only imagine without the tools of spirit, without the awareness that something like just my example of the news is a machine of fear production, that an empath out in those streets, what can I do, you know? And we still carry that burden in our hearts. Compassionate individuals, even if we're not watching the news or whatever, we still know it's there. But something that can help us to stay in the game and not be harmed ourselves are our spiritual practices, such as prayer and energy, and being able to temper our experiences with this balance. So, that compassionate model, it can bring a comprehensive and healthy empathetic or empathic capacity with both the emotional and cognitive necessary. It's crucial for us to cultivate both dimensions. Cognitive element allows us to step into the shoes of others and perceive the world from their vantage point. Yet it's equally vital to remember the self other distinction, which is our work, usually, as empaths. And this awareness prevents us from becoming overwhelmed by emotional resonance and safeguards our well being. Thus, the equilibrium between emotional and cognitive empathy is indispensable both in our personal lives and as practitioners, if you are a practitioner, facilitating positive connections with others. I asked my husband today when I was preparing this, because my husband is, his human design is, he has a defined emotional solar plexus. So that means he doesn't have uh, he doesn't empathically sponge everybody's emotions, but he is a very compassionate, loving person. So I just told him about cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. And I didn't, I said, and he's like, yeah, I definitely lean to the to the cognitive empathy, but I have emotional empathy too. And I was like, yeah, I agree. I think you do. And I was like, how does emotional empathy happen for you? And he said, well, it probably happens more when I've had that experience. And so I can recognize that someone else is hurting. And if I've had that experience, then it really does make me feel like them. And I was like, yeah. So if you imagine it going down into his emotional center, which are his own emotions, and stirring it up. And I think that's really lovely. One of my professors in my mind body psychology program was talking about this. And she said that, she's like, well, I don't remember what the question was, but she was prompted to say, well, I really have the cognitive empathy. That's my predominant way of, moving about life. She said, but I have developed more of the emotional empathy. And she said, and even so much so that when I tell people that I'm mostly like, I emphasize the cognitive empathy, they're surprised that I tell them that. They think, oh, well, you seem very emotionally empathetic. And she said, but it's something that I have developed. And she said, and by the way, it's a big point of division for me and my daughter because she's much more sensitive than I am. And so it's also a way that I've been able to, kind of bridge the gap and come that way. And then I will tell you from my experience, this is a part of what I think has helped me to balance my sponging, if you will, and my ability to tolerate being around others when they're in their suffering so that I can be of help, be of service. And this comes out in my work, my one-on-one work. And today I just had a session. The woman showed up and just started her heart pouring out, talking about all of the terrible things that she's been through, the abuses she's been through. And I was like, breathing through it. And I do feel myself pulling my energy up a little bit, but I can't not feel it. But I do it wouldn't be appropriate. This is how we can get inappropriate. If I started bawling too and saying, "I know. I get it." And like no, that's not what she needs. This is why the cognitive empathy as a tool can help us because we can intellectually say, what does someone need? Even though I can feel it. Do they need someone else crying and, saying, I feel that too. I feel it equally to you, even though we can. Or do they need someone to feel it with them and then be the strength and be the shoulder for them to cry on if that's what they need, or to also be able to it's just so well rounded and beautiful if you think about it, to be able to act upon supporting them in the alleviation of their suffering. And I know I told you the story already about me and the vet, where the the woman came in, said, my house burnt down and my cats were in the house, and here's my dog. Oh my God, he was in the house. And, I felt myself feeling it as though it was my own. And I also felt the thing that my husband said. I started going spinning, going, what if my house burned down? Oh, my cats. Oh my God. I started like spinning into negative imaginings. But, fortunately, it didn't crumble me so much that I was taken out of the game. I was able to stand up, and I knew how important it was for her to. It's so valuable to have someone who can genuinely empathetically be there with you. I knew how painful that would be, and I've lost animals. So that's the piece that I wanted. We're all working toward compassion, whether a person leans more cognitively empathetic or emotionally empathetic. If we can balance those and find that compassion piece, then that's how we can, well, that's what unifies us. And I think that's wonderful. And it brings in the fullness of human experience and potential to bring in the intellectual side and the emotional side and coming together in a harmony, and maybe in a group of people. Now I'm talking about how to balance it in an individual, but in a family or in a community. And then, you know, being able to switch these roles. So we have this, just how the garden blooms with all of its beautiful value. There's a tendency in coaching, and probably in intuitive practitioners' work, because there often is there's some kind of coaching that goes on. But there is this tendency in coaching that I've seen. Hopefully, possibly, it's from a person who's not really well trained, not properly trained. I don't know how to account for it. But it's the idea that coaching is fixing, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This was this can happen in friendships too. Here's an example. Someone that I worked with said that they had a reading with someone. So this was an intuitive, and this person had. I guess I can just tell you a little bit about the story just to make it make sense. This person had an unusual arrangement for their marriage. Like, this person married someone they had only met briefly, and they had been living separately for a lot of their marriage, and were trying to come back together. So there's, it's difficult to deal with that situation. And so the intuitive told this person, well, why did you do that? That's you shouldn't have done that. That's not a good way to start a marriage or to have a marriage. And so you see that in that sense of, I mean, obviously that's just bad everything, ain't it? But I want to give us the example of how we're not here to fix. Certainly, if someone's already in a situation, we don't just judge them and then say you shouldn't have, right? Now, there is another more subtle aspect of this that I've seen, and that is where the coach does the thing that seems like active and compassionate listening, and they say, well, so tell me, how is it going? What's going on in that relationship? And the person says, well, I was hurt because my friend, told me something that she had been keeping from me, and something in her personal life, and I was actually hurt that she didn't trust me with that information. I really thought that our friendship was close enough that she could let me support her. And then the coach says, "Well, it sounds like you're making it about yourself. It sounds like you aren't letting her be herself." And now here's the thing, that might be what you're assessing, but that's not empowering them. So again, it's almost like they take the word coach to mean like the drill sergeant kind of coach, like the coach on the field. Hey, idiot, hustle up. Okay. I know these are a little bit extreme, but I think the extremes help us to understand what the real capacity is for truly being an active listener, a compassionate listener, and support to help them to move along. You see, in that second example, the coach was trying to fix the person. Well, stop making it about yourself. Clearly, the client doesn't recognize that person might be like that kind of really sensitive type empath and doesn't realize they're making it about themselves. That isn't empowering, just to say you're being wrong, right? Okay. So these are the ways that if we don't relate to the other person's situation, we just take a beat. And I have to say, after I learned about human design, I learned that reflectors can condition other people too. And while it is my tendency to give big picture information and context and get, this is where we want to go, there's a part of that where I'm aware that that's my tendency, and that's my offering, and yet I need to offer it with compassion and care, and not a fear of I need people to skip steps so that they can be where I can see we should be. You see what I mean? So I want to just make it clear that it's not just that only people who have the cognitive empathy can condition other people. No, no, no. The in the sense of a really sensitive person can also condition another person and think that a person is doing them wrong. All right. Now we're going to move into another lesson that is about the types of empaths. And it's not a complete, but it has actually, especially when we're talking about the capacity to have that literal input of energy, especially that it affects us in our felt sense. That's really what is emphasized here. So here we go. Okay, so we looked at that model of types of empathy from psychology, and now venturing over to more of, well, it is the spiritual domain. However, I paused it on purpose because I want to say, grab your chart if you don't know off the top of your head, because this might help you, or grab, if you have an app, have charts handy, either yours and or maybe some other people's that you're thinking about while you're listening or watching this part. Okay. However, I gotta say, as I talk about human design, it technically is spiritual, but it really it doesn't tell us what to do spiritually at all. Because what is so beautiful about human design is that it's a synthesis of four ancient observational sciences. And when I say science, I don't mean classic science. I mean pseudoscience, that it has some qualities of science. That's what an observational science would have to be, because you can't put it all to the scientific method. But anyway, observational sciences, which are similar to social. Okay, I stopped it again on purpose because I realized that I want to save a little more time, and I'm going to skip to a few minutes in. Here we go. No more stopping. Here we go. Or the emotional empathy and, how psychology sees it. And so far as human design is concerned, it's characterized by having an open emotional solar plexus center. So your solar plexus is the seat of emotions, and when it's undefined or open, we use those kind of synonymously, but it's undefined, then I have now, since I've known I mean, first of all, even before I knew about human design, I'd meet someone, I'd be like, that's an empath. I mean, like the 5 seconds, they hadn't even said anything yet, and I could feel it like radiating off of them. Now that I am aware of human design, and if I can, I haven't really, I don't think I've ever really gotten it wrong. And something as big a piece as that, their open or defined emotional center, it's just something that, again, it's like if I opened up a computer without looking at the user manual, I could probably tell if it's a Mac or a PC. I mean, I can by the margins and by the fact there's an apple in the corner. To me, when I meet someone, I can feel that apple in the corner if they So anyway, that's the classic one. We can be prone to absorbing and authentically undergoing the emotions of others, and it does typically require some kind of awareness process or awareness development to be able to utilize and develop more of that cognitive and also compassionate empathy. Although again, even those with the other type, they need to develop compassion too. That's part of growth. So with that open or slash undefined emotional center in that human design body graph, in any case, those open centers are for others. It means that it's asking questions about the world. It's pulling in energies for others. That's kind of its function. So just setting that so we can understand these other types that I've pulled out by looking through this lens. So they actually are most vulnerable, and in those centers, most vulnerable to being conditioned from the outside energies, and you would say they have little to no filter to outside energies. I say little to no because I don't know if it's little, I don't know if it's no filter, but I definitely know that we can develop an awareness around it. So that's what's most important, because even though we develop cognitive empathy, we still feel other people's emotions as though they are our own. Even though we are aware it's not mine, I still feel it natively, authentically. It's an interesting, almost seeming paradox, but when you start to groove with it, you get the hang of it. And so the function of any of the open centers is actually to amplify outside energies for the collective, for the others in the landscape. And so those open centers, they actually on their own, we have an inconsistent individuated function in that area. So inconsistent emotional function. I'm just basically a blank palette, whereas someone else who has a defined emotional center has has their own emotions, and they have this movement to it that is always happening. And to them, that actually it's a lot for them to have their emotional wave, as it's called. But this also is true for the other centers that are about health and immunity, or about willpower and ego and energy. And so that's just to set the stage of what open or undefined centers are. Another thing that is associated with being having that emotional empathy is actually having gate 19 defined in your chart. Now, again, you don't have to be a human design expert, but some of you are and are investigating human design. So I want to mention this because gate 19 indicates a genetic predisposition to be clairsentient. And that's what I think empaths want to be able to move toward, to be consciously clairsentient. So, clairsentience is the psychic ability to feel outside energies, not just emotions. It can be sensations, but it's more of pulling in subtle energies and to be able to read them or taste them, if you will. And so I think if we're able to, while they will strike us as an emotional empath, they'll strike us, then if we can develop the conscious clairsentience, which is maybe another way that we're getting to compassion or we're getting to cognitive empathy. But again, just as to talk about the human design piece a little bit, because gate 19 is the predisposition to be clairsentient, to have that psychic skill. It's not exactly the same as having the emotional solar plexus open, but it's the ability to it can malfunction to actually being codependent. And I would say that when we are malfunctioning as an emotional empath, where we are feeling other people's emotions and identifying to them, that's a kind of energy codependence and maybe literal codependence. You know what I mean? Like taking care of others beyond the facility that is helpful to ourselves or to others. So, in the way that open centers are for others, defined gates are for you, but it can still malfunction and, it can still go awry if in, because according to the gene keys, which is an offshoot of human design, gate 19's shadow is codependency. So just a little side note there in case you're really interested in the human design piece. So that's the emotional empath. Now, the next one I want to talk about, environmental empath. Now, I want to make sure that I have a whole separate type for the geo/nature empath. So when I'm talking about environment, I'm not talking about like our Earth's environment. In this case, I'm talking about the individual's resonance with their immediate surroundings and possibly, especially the societal context that we're in. So that's what I mean by the environmental, like this environment that I'm in right here. And if there were people in here, that would be like the more prioritized part of the environment, right? So this concept is distinct, like I said, from the geo or nature empath that I've categorized and I'll tell you about. And it's linked to having an open identity center in the human design chart. And it has to do with so the identity center has to do with love and direction in life. So if you can imagine having a heightened receptivity to the societal milieu as it concerns amplifying their identities, how they're identifying, and the love that they have, or how they can relate in love, and how that is moving them forward in their direction in life. I would say that this one, as well as some of the other ones, aligns with being, but maybe especially this one, if you've ever heard of a highly sensitive person, an HSP, because the HSP seems to be responding to, aware of environmental energies outside of themselves, moods, but it might change, it might impact their mood, but they aren't necessarily thinking it's theirs. They don't have that very direct. It's like going into the room and they're like, ooh, you know what I mean? I can sense the mood and it's affecting my mood because I'm pulling it in. So that's what I think HSP, maybe especially the identity center, maybe also the next one I'll talk about. I think it's the next I'll talk about, which is the heart will center. That's what I think it aligns with. So now I'll say that if you're an emotional empath, you probably have this as well, because that emotions are so important to humans that it's kind of hard to distinguish them from everything else that's going on with the human being. Now, if a person has that open identity center, but they have a defined emotional center that we've been talking about as the classic empath, what I think can happen here, and what I've witnessed rather than what I think, what I've witnessed can happen here is that a person can pull in those energies and then send it to their own emotional body, and it can stimulate their own emotional body. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily like they're feeling other people's emotions directly as though it is their own, but they're pulling them in as love, as identity, and the things that are, good, bad, or Tuesday about their identities, their love, and their direction in life. And then of course we feel emotional because of that, and they have their own emotions that will relate or correlate to that. It still feels really different though, I would say. And then if a person, yeah, if you have an open emotional center, it's just another way that you're amplifying emotion, you're amplifying human energies. So there's that one. So we have emotional, environmental, and the next one is what I'm calling the health/immunity empath. Now this corresponds with having an undefined spleen energy center, because the spleen is about health, survival. It's a very old and primal energy, and it is related to the immune system. And when it's open, once again, that's for others. So a person actually just had a session today, and this person has had a lot of immune disorders and diseases, and her issue was I keep following the standard American diet or what other people tell me is right for me, and none of it has worked for me. I have a way different way that I need to, and it took her years to be able to sort out what's right for her. But see, again, pulling in what's from someone else is what actually was, throwing off her whole system. This can have the adeptness to read or pull in, identify with the vitality of others, of the collective, of systems, and even like, a whole something that's an entity, whether it's an individual human being entity or something like a company even. And these kinds of empaths might be the ones who their mirror neurons are so powerful in this area of health and vitality. I heard I think it was a Radio Lab podcast, or maybe it was on the radio still at the time. And there was this woman who they suspected had, again, a strong mirror neuron response because she got to the place where she couldn't leave her house because she described this one incident where there was a small child in a parking lot, and she saw a cart coming toward him really fast, and no one else was around. The mom didn't see it. So she started running to try to help the child, but when it bonked him in the head, she passed out. So again, talk about not being able to be helpful in the situation. She passed out from his injury, being hit in the head. But her response to other people's health was so direct that, she didn't like develop a bloody gash on her head from it, but she had all of the other symptoms because her body believed it was happening to her. And so this is a kind of really, I mean, that will affect your emotions, right? Eventually, if that's going on for you. So that's what I would call a health or immunity empath. And let's see. Let me see. Also, it is the 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 kind of psychic abilities that can get drawn into this would be like clairaudience. So a person with that, it might stimulate more clairaudience too in that person. Just my suppose and my observation too. We'll just like consider that. So they may have a sense to rescue others and, you know, thwart their own survival. That woman that I'm talking about is really, really, but also there can be a talent in it. One of my clients is a health coach, and she is so great at advising other people and putting together really beautiful programs for them to optimize their health because she has that open spleen. Okay, next one I want to talk about is what I call the egoic empath. And now I don't mean arrogant. I mean ego in the sense of your worth and even your will, because the will slash ego slash heart center in the human design chart, that's what it's about. It's about worth. And so if a person has that open, they could pick up on a threatened ego or threatened worth of others in the context of it being a negative thing that could happen and sort of make it their own. And this could really bring someone down. I've seen people who are really defined in other ways, but they have that open heart will center, and they can, if they're picking up and amplifying on someone's threatened worth, it can really take them down. They can have a strong, response or reaction to that. So that's something, that's another one there. I call that the egoic empath. Now, with all of these, we're working on the concept of not merging with another. So if we're amplifying, that's one thing. That's kind of the that's the that can be a benefit. And the amplification, just to put that to put a finer point on that, doesn't have to mean that we're actually talking about it, we're acting it out. I think it's just an energy thing too. We are noticing it, and if we are able to shift to a cognition about it, a metacognition, which I'll explain, or a meta empathy, then we can be of help to it. We can process what's happening, and then we can sort out how we can activate the compassion piece. So with an egoic empath merging with someone else's wounded or threatened self-worth, that can really bring a powerful, you know, reaction that can be very hurtful to everyone and really take down that empath who is doing that, who's feeling that. So let me, before I go on, because I already mentioned it, metacognition. I'll just weave that in here right now. What metacognition is, what it is that to think about how we're thinking. That's what that word actually means. It means to create that witness and notice what we're thinking. And this is actually a process that can happen in meditation when they say, just notice your thoughts. If a thought happens when you notice it, basically you're creating a separation between you and the thoughts. And this is, again, to being able to develop the cognitive empathy, which can lead us to a balanced facility to have compassion. I coach people wherever they're, whatever undefined centers they have in their chart, even if it's like, if they have an undefined ajna, which is a processing center. I was just telling my husband this the other day. He's like, how do I get my process to work for me? And I'm like, sit down and imagine what would be good for Brian, how his process could work. And then write it down and follow it as a guideline. But if you sit down and try to think it out every single day, it's going to be like, well, where is it? I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? It's going to be moving all around in you. So making a copy of yourself and think about how you're thinking or feel about how you're feeling. So metacognition or meta empathy, in order to be able to create that distance and to bring more utilization to it. I tell you, this has been a lifesaver. And I'll tell you one other way I've used it is because I have all of my centers open. So it's a, it's a big mess half the time. No, I'm kidding. But in order for me to sort out certain things like my marketing, how to be, I can advise people on marketing all day long. It's literally one of my jobs at HMI is to talk about marketing. But for me, I'm like, what? I don't know. I forgot to market or I don't know how to market. You know what I mean? So what I did was I actually did this silly thing where I set up a Zoom camera and I put 2 chairs facing each other, and I sat on one side and I talked to Tricia about her marketing, and then I sat on the other side and I talked to the and I went back and forth and literally changed chairs and came up with a plan for myself and started following it. So the part you have to have the discipline to follow it, and then you also have to change it sometimes too. You have to go, "Oh, it's time for an update on this meeting," the whatever piece you're talking about. All right. So back to the last few of my types of empaths. We have the energy empath, and this is for people who have an open sacral. The sacral is the source for life force energy and having the energy to do work and to build and to kind of move along with life with a big humming kind of, like sustainable energy. And so if you have an open sacral center, this is how this shows up for me. You could be amplifying other people, pulling in outside energies that aren't your own. And by the way, you could look like you have more energy than everybody in the world when you're amplifying like that. And so how this happens to me and I get myself in trouble is if I am at a gathering or a party and I have to really use that metacognition in order to keep myself from burning myself out or from, like, I remember when I was younger, like being too big and too annoyingly energetic. So when I have to, like this last Halloween, I was going to a party where there was music and, there was all, I mean, you give me music, someone's going to have to shoot me with a trank dart unless I set up, I set up a plan. I really only have energy until 9 for this. That's sustainable for me. And I have to like keep looking at myself so that I can stay, appropriate for others as well as for myself. So that's something that can happen when this type of energy type is merging with others in their energy and it feels like it's their own. So we need to, be aware of that. Now, finally, the one that I want to mention is the geo/nature empath. This one maybe has to do with open centers, but I find it really having to do with gates that we have defined, and those are the gates 5 and 15. But essentially, I'm just going to leave this one a little more open ended. Tends to have to do with people that you have a connection with nature in a way that it's animals, it's plants, it's trees, it's flowers, it's systems, storm systems, or you know any kind of weather that could be occurring. And this can happen. It's really interesting because I find people, if it has to do with weather or even something like earthquakes, the people that have more of this nature or geo empath thing, they're feeling things before they happen and they don't know why. And then when the actual thing happens, they feel relieved. And so this comes to an awareness if I'm feeling anxiety. I think this probably has to do with cosmological or astrological events too, because that's affecting the planet. But, we might need to realize, just like we do with other things, if I'm feeling something isn't mine, we won't have the resolution sometimes at all because it could be going on the other side of the planet. Or, just to be able to get very mindful and self inquisitive, to be able to find out how to make sure that we are balancing ourselves and that we're actually okay. And we might be processing some collective energies. And then, of course, this comes with a great sensitivity to what could be occurring with an individual animal, a species, or, something like climate crisis, or animal species who are under threat. So then we want to bring in our compassion. We want to bring in, perhaps this is a part of my soul mission or life purpose, be able to bring that separation in and to feel like, we're actually making a contribution. I think that can lead us to some personal self transcendence, to be able to recognize it as a gift. I mean, all of these things can, and from a place of strength and self-actualization, to be able to transcend the personal self, allow higher self to step into the personal self and utilize the personal self's actions and will and intelligence and skills and just everything in the life, to be able to give back and to have a life that is meaningful as well as self-actualized in the personal perspective. So there you go. Those are the types of empaths as I see them. One thing that I discovered as I was moving through these lessons, I told the story about my friend who, has a tendency every now and again, not often, to condition me when he hears something that he doesn't quite understand why I'm approaching it that way, and then he just, you should do this. It dawned on me. He has a lot of definition, but especially in his body, and he has the undefined will center. So he has that egoic empath thing. So when he hears me talking about something, and it sounds like I'm not up to my own self-worth, I'm undervaluing myself. Oh, he's like, oh, I don't want her to feel that way. I don't want to feel this way either. And so you see, so my suggestion, how you can use this, and I'm sure you're already thinking of it, but just to bundle this all up. If you want to take these into account, all these different ways, as well as many other things in the human design chart, but first of all, obviously you may have heard something that you may have recognized something about yourself in this, or perhaps your partner, your kids or friends or whatever. And what you can do, if you haven't already started using human design in your sessions, you don't have to make it a big expert thing. You can the best way to work with human design at all is to experiment with it. They call it an experiment. And the way I did it, and the way I've suggested many of my mentees to do it, seems to really work. All you need to do is ask your clients if you can have their birth time and place and all of that, and just say that helps me. If you're doing the intuitive side, it just helps me to hook into your chart, and they won't ask you why. And if they do, you just say, yeah, no, it just helps me to anchor in. You don't even have to promise them anything. Or you could say, I use some human design, if you feel comfortable doing that. And then just have their chart before the session, and maybe you're intuitively guided to one piece of it. You're like, oh, I see that they have that undefined identity center. And so I might listen then for that piece. So then you can encourage them, you can help to attune that, either in your counseling, as we're talking about, in your coaching in this particular set of lessons, or maybe literally with your energy healing, or if you're doing hypnosis and that portion of it. And you can notice maybe they need support there, if they're amplifying energies as the kind of environmental empath or identity empath, and support them in that, and even validate them. Listen, if you're to the point where you like are using human design, hey, I do use human design. Human design. You don't even have to give them a full lesson on it. Just say you have this piece that this is how it functions, and again, encourage them to move more in what's in alignment for them. They'll hear you recognizing them, and they will instantly feel validated. So that's what I have for you. And yeah, going through the lens for coaching and counseling, adding some pieces about how we're different, and of course, how to use our either our learned empathy or our natural empathy, either our nature or our nurture, to move to that place of compassion. All right, mostly lessons tonight, but I'm inviting anyone to studio in case there was something you wanted to chat about before we clock out for the night. And so yeah. Oh, and Courtney too, if you're still here, let me send you an invite. And yeah. Oh, there's Jamie. Hi, Jamie. How are you? There's Lori. Hi.
Hi, I'm good.
Good.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. Any questions or comments or anything you guys want to chat about or ask about anything?
That was really fantastic. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
good.
I'm
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
not an empath. I think I told you that the other
Mm-hmm.
night. So it was interesting to, learn more about empaths and understand myself better.
Yeah.
Um, but what really rose to the top was just at the very end when you talked about those gates 5 and 15,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
which I have open, and so does my daughter.
Uh-huh.
And I have never felt connected to nature until very recently.
Oh.
And I think that's because I'm coming into my authentic self
Oh.
in a bigger way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's suddenly just like, especially birds, it's just
Mm-hmm.
a huge thing in my life all of a sudden, not just your bird, but everywhere, but your bird too.
Come on now.
Anyway, I find that really interesting.
Yeah, and the thing is, of course, I mean, I know you know this, but it just bears repeating that we have all of everything in the chart. You know what I mean? Everything is our potential. We just have some things that might be more dominant, some things that we're kind of learning the harder lessons through because they're our dominant things, whether they're defined or undefined. But we have everything. Yeah, that I wanted to share. I didn't share with you the other night. My Brian once he came home and he was he'd been playing tennis, and he was like, I think I've told you, he's like, I don't like to when I'm playing tennis, we're playing doubles, I don't really like people to be watching, like they're it's like spectators. I just like for us to play because I just find it distracting. He's like, but tonight there were people sitting up on the deck and they were watching us and acting like it was an event. And he goes, and by the way, he's like, his meditation, his mindfulness, his spiritual practice has really like increased a lot. And he's like, and I noticed, he uses tennis actually as a mindful practice. He's like, I noticed that if I stopped for a second when I was feeling uncomfortable, and I listened to what my energy was saying, it was like something I wasn't thinking. And he goes, and he said, this is why I'm sharing. He goes, I'm not an empath, but do you think that somehow, and I'm like, yeah, 100%, I've already told you this, because he has an undefined head and ajna. And I was like, yes, you're hearing other people's thoughts, and that's why he thinks they're his own unless he takes a moment and goes, wait, what's that now? You know?
Right.
So it's really fascinating.
That happens to me too.
Of course, because
I
you have
just
the
think,
undefined, both of those too. Yeah.
right, exactly. So I think that's just, intuition or psychic ability or whatever. It's,
Telepathy. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I don't feel it. Now, there are times when I'm in a vulnerable state and I will feel it. And it
Yes.
and it hurts. I physically get a sensation in my solar plexus to, label it,
Yeah.
that hurts. It's like a twinge
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, is that again, it's all connected. And I only mention this because these things go literally to your felt sense, like the body felt sense, emotional felt sense. But of course, if you're having a thought that's negative, even if it's not your own, of course it can affect you emotionally. But it's a longer path if you are defined emotion. You know what I mean? Like you said, you're aware of it, but you don't necessarily feel it or identify to it, because of course thoughts and feelings they overlap, but they also have their own way that the inputs come in. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
I think it would be a lot harder to do therapy the way I do it if I were an empath. And
Right.
Kate and I have actually never talked about that, but I know she's an empath and I'm
Yeah.
not. And I can be disconnected. I can be hard, I can, yeah,
Yeah,
that.
you can have objectivity. And
Right.
and see, it's beautiful either way. You know what I mean? And it's like, so like my mentor, and she's my hypnotherapist at HMI. I don't know her chart, but I know she's emotionally defined. But there's something about how she can hold this strong gravity, and she has absolute she sees me as very sensitive. She doesn't think there's anything wrong with, you know what I mean. So to be held in the awareness of the opposite with all of that understanding, and then of course to be held in the same with understanding, you see what I mean, like it just.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that story that I told, I said my friend, it's actually Carson's parents. She said, since then she said, like, you can always use my name, everyone's name in my family. Yeah, her mom's actually all 9 centers defined, and her dad has an undefined identity and heart will. So he was the one who couldn't get the cat because he's like, I can't do it. And she's just like, I know he doesn't want it. Yeah. And it's, every, like in my marriage, when there's something that I think is uncomfortable or confrontational, like some negotiating, I'll be like, can you do it to Brian? And he's like, I mean, yeah, but if I'm not available, I think it's okay if you do. And I'm like, all right, I just have to go do a lot more work to get over my fear, but it will end up being good for me
Right.
too. Yeah. But,
Right.
he's like, sure, I'll do it. And then he's having the conversation. I'm like, oh my God, the world is ending. And everybody's just like, yeah, that's great. Sure, no problem. Anyway, we're all beautiful in all the different ways. Yeah.
In all the ways. What about you, Jamie?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed the lessons tonight, and I, coming out of the first semester of my counseling schooling, especially the active listening, the reflective listening, it is hard. It is hard to do, and we're conditioned to respond to people in a certain way by society, and like you mentioned, how you talk with a friend, it's so different than how you're going to be, listening to a client and actually wanting to respond to them. It's almost unnatural. And I watched a lot of peers really struggle with it.
Yeah.
I think I had a little bit of like a head up than them, just like a little bit because of the spiritual work.
Yeah.
But it's definitely interesting to me to I don't know, learn about all those aspects of it. So.
I remember, for me, it felt like I clicked into it at some point. You know what I mean? So I'll bet that it probably already has happened for you, right? Like it clicked in, you're like, oh, that's where it is.
Yes, I think it started to, we really only practiced like 3 official times.
Okay.
But I think it will happen. And I have a mentor who was a therapist, and she's talked about how she thinks she's just channeling,
Yeah, great. I love it. Perfect.
So
Perfect
she's like,
mentor.
I was saying things that I didn't know where it was coming from. So, so yeah, I'm looking forward to when I can be, calm and not overthinking it. But
yeah, just keep anchoring in your body. That's what, just drop the energy down here, and trust the listening through the body. And because we are conditioned to listen to the words, I don't know if you heard me tell, I have a client, I don't see her super regularly. I see her every now and again. She is has advanced age, and she has early stages of Alzheimer's. And so when she's sharing, she mixes names and situations, sometimes more than others. And when I first started working with her, I was like way up in my head, going like, "Wait, who's that? Wait, what's the?" And then I was like, "Wait. She doesn't need me. We've got nowhere. She doesn't need me." So I dropped in my body, and I was like, I'm pulling in the energy. And it works the same because it's kind of like that spiritual listening, that intuitive listening too comes on, because then I'll be like, oh, let's say more about that. You know what I mean? And it doesn't, the logic doesn't actually, well, the logic isn't there very, very well. So, yeah, it's, what's so great about it is because if we're dealing with heavy material, if someone is going to be talking about, and Lori, you do so much mediumship. This is something that I think mediums have to. I think a medium, someone who's practicing mediumship regularly, they have to develop this, because they'll just be hurting people. When someone's bringing something really painful to the session, you can't fix it, and that's not what it's for. So it's really just like, sometimes that's the best therapy you can give.
Yeah, I can't do mediumship with clients.
Not right now. No, right.
No, because I cry every time,
Yeah.
and that's just inappropriate. But I am practicing it, in my groups and stuff, so that at least I can gauge myself and know where I'm at, because it's hard to know unless you do it.
Yeah. You can practice with me because I'm not not Barnabas, but like, I'm not in grief over my dad anymore. It's just like,
Well, so Jamie and Kate and I have a channeling group, and with Tara, and last week was Kate's mother's, who's passed, 101st birthday. And I wasn't even thinking. I just instantly was like, oh, we've got to bring your mom to the session. Let's do that. And I did that. And oh my God, it didn't occur to me. I mean, I got all the way through and channeled the whole thing, and then I just fell apart.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, right. No, I should not have done that. But maybe it's just helping me move through it. I don't know if it's good for me or bad or what.
I think it's a safe way to practice it. Obviously, Kate can handle, she can support you, and you didn't harm Kate,
Right.
So I think it worked out beautifully that you forgot or didn't think about it.
Jamie, tell me if I'm wrong. I'd really love to share with you what happened in our group today.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was it today?
Well, yeah, we meet on Thursdays.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great.
And so we just didn't know what to do. We were just trying to think of something. One person in the group had some really tragic thing going on. But we kind of talked through it and got done with that. But ultimately what we did was, so joy was part of our conversation. I'm feeling quite a lot of joy lately, and my kids are feeling a lot of joy. And it's like, all at the same time, in the midst of grief, there's this mountain of joy happening. It's like, it's a new thing for me. I'm not used to being that happy. And so we started talking about what we could do. So we did a round robin. So there's 4 of us on the screen in the Zoom boxes. And we did a group invocation where each person started the invocation, and then the next person took over, and we went all the way around. And then we brought in joy, love, abundance, and gratitude, and filled ourselves up with that, and then passed it to the next person in the box. So we each went to 1. And then once all of us were full, we gave it to wherever it was that we wanted to send it outside of ourselves.
Wow.
In a community, I sent mine to Israel, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what was interesting to me, and the reason I bring it up, is you did this compassion meditation at the beginning. And when I opened myself up, I thought I was channeling somebody because the sensation I have in my head when I'm channeling is a sense of fullness.
Hmm.
And it was the compassion was still there. It was
Mm.
only 3 hours before we started today.
Yeah.
So it was just a lot still there. And I still had, I didn't need to cultivate more, I just started sending more out because I was so full up. It was
Ah.
really a remarkable experience. I don't know, Jamie, if you want to expand on that.
I don't know what more to say. It was just really powerful and intense. And I think we all got to experience it in our own way, but also share with each other and build off each other's energy, and like the messages that were coming through before. So it was really fluid and
So beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
Oh,
it was
that's so
awesome.
beautiful. Let's do something like that in Sacred Sphere. Sounds
Yeah,
amazing. How amazing. We just
yeah.
pass it all around.
Yeah. Why
Lori,
not?
will you lead it? I mean,
Sure.
will you like explain it to us and lead it, Oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
Sure.
how amazing. I love that.
Yeah. I'd be happy to. I'd be honored to. Thank you for asking.
I think we're meeting this Sunday, I'm sure, right?
Oh,
Can you come? Let me
no,
see.
I've got a funeral
Oh,
Sunday.
okay. I think it's
Yeah,
this
but
Sunday.
maybe another time.
Okay. Yeah, we have this Sunday. So then the next one is the 22nd. So maybe the 22nd. Or if you're able to come, Jamie, you could lead it, and then you could do it again I mean, I think it'd be a really great practice that we do
Yeah.
sort of
Jamie
regularly.
and Kate were both part of it. So
Yeah.
y'all could
Okay.
figure that out.
Okay.
Wow, that's beautiful. So it sounds so amazing. Feels so amazing. I'm feeling it through your share. Yeah.
It was a great night.
Yeah. Yeah. Great day. Good day. While the class was going, by the way, I went to like refill my water, and I was in the kitchen, and I had I have like in-ear monitors, so I was listening. Was in the kitchen, and I'm the only one in the studio. Like no one's been working here today. And I thought I heard something, and I was like, oh gosh, you're just like because I'm having a little PTSD still, from the other day. And I was like, gosh, you're just imagining things because of this. And I felt a presence. I was like, okay, that's just probably a spirit, and I don't need to pay any attention to that. And then I walked out of the kitchen, and there was a man there, and I almost shit my pants. It's my neighbor, but but because I had the ear monitors in, I didn't hear it very clearly. Obviously, the door was locked. I would have heard the door unlocking, and no, it was just my neighbor. Anyway, I scared him because he was like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry. I heard you in the kitchen. I figured you heard me." And I was like, "No, I'm jumpy right now."
Oops.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Give yourself some time to get through that.
Yeah, but I was like, you know what? No, I just learned something right there. I probably shouldn't walk around the building with both ear things in, because for even when I'm not jumpy, like I should be aware of my surroundings a little more. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for chatting tonight. Aliel needs to go inside her house. You want to say goodnight, Aliel? Good night.
Night, night, Aliel.
You see those
She's
wings?
gotten a little plumper, right?
Yeah, she's getting like whole new feathers are coming in. Do you see those that are sticking out of her wings? Like those are brand new feathers.
Oh.
Yeah, and she's starting her adolescent molt. Like she's starting to lose some feathers, but also new feathers are coming in. And yeah, so she doesn't. I can only let her touch me. She doesn't.
Cannot hold me down.
Anyway, yeah, she's changing, and she's very, very hyper, very active. And loves flying and landing.
She's so cute.
She is so cute.
Yeah.
She's very confident too. Like if we ever do a retreat here, or something like that, and you guys come and meet her, she'll just hang out with you. She'll sit right on your finger.
And that's because of you, Tricia. It's so evident that her confidence is because she's got a good mommy who's really given her all that she needs. She feels safe.
Well, thank you for that. It is also her personality, though, too. You know how it is. It's both. Maybe it's both, right? It's nature and nurture, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But thank you. I received that. Thank you. All right. I love you guys. When is the first Monday Sacred Sphere? It's going to be in July. We're going to do it starting it in July. I actually was going to invite Sacred Sphere, but I have too much stuff going on. But anyway, there's only like one person in Sacred Sphere not in our program, I think, or maybe two. 3. No, there's like 3 people. But anyway.
But the rest of June Mondays are still going to be QRID.
Yes. But don't worry about it if you can't. And here's the thing, too. If when we move into July, as I'm still putting together the portal the way I need it, I might sneak some of the lessons into other sacred spheres or something like that. So, you know what I mean? Like, don't have any FOMO. We're going to work it out. Okay.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, have a great night.
You too.
I love you guys.
Love you too.
Bye,
Bye.
Grace. Bye, Courtney. Bye, Kate. I think Kate's gone already. Bye.